Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday morning as we discuss marketing to Gen Z customers. Newaki is an engagement agency that works with organizations to design and build new transformational experiences. So thank you for joining our webinar. Wanted to introduce ourselves. My name is Wyatt Tinder. I'm VP of Marketing and a partner at Newaki. Megan and Lena, would you want to introduce yourselves to everyone?
Yeah, my name is Megan Otto. I'm an event producer here at Milwaukee. I also think it's important to say I am 26 because it is relative to this presentation that we're going to give here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lena Orwig. I'm also an event producer, experience designer for Milwaukee, and I'm 25. So we're both right on the cusp, but we're still holding on to that Gen Z title.
Awesome. Well, this morning we're gonna talk a little bit about who is this Gen Z demographic, why you should be thinking about attracting Gen Z customers, where Gen Z customers are, and then how to meet them where they are, and with all of this info, how you can reach them. So with that, I will turn over to Megan and Lena.
Awesome. So this is just a meme that I'm sure some of you have seen, but just talking about Gen Z, and I know that there are always issues of how do we talk to that younger generation of people who it seems really difficult to relate to. So the idea of chasing that youth and the trend to try to really make your brand feel authentic, when if done wrong, it can feel pretty inauthentic and disingenuous. So it's really about finding that balance to have that genuine brand voice so you can make that connection with the younger generations here. So who is Gen Z? That is the question. I know that there are always random age groups that you'll see, but we think of Gen Z as people born between 1996 and 2010. So it's really those younger adults aged about 13 to 27. So again, Lena and I are on that older spectrum of Gen Z, but we are holding on to it with all we can, though sometimes we will say to each other, wow, I feel like the old Gen Z because I don't know what young Gen Z is sometimes talking about, though we're still part of that generation here. So thinking about that, we are considered those Zoomers. So 66% of the Gen Z population are actually legal working adults. We're no longer those little kids anymore. Gen Z are people who can vote, people who drive cars today, people who have their own incomes, which actually plays a really big role in marketing to them and why you would want to. Gen Z are in college, they're skipping college and going right into the workplace, newly graduated, and they really have a huge influence on the economy and the social climate as a whole. Another thing that I really like to think about who Gen Z is, and I think it's really important to think of from a marketing perspective, are that Gen Z, like us, are technically people who are digital natives. So digital natives is a term that was coined by a writer named Mark Prensky, and it's really encompassing that group of people who grew up within the age of technology. So we're people that from the age of 2, we're on iPads or iPhones of our parents and knew how to use elements like that. Maybe not that young, but some of the younger Gen Z definitely were. But we are people who grew up with the computer, always being in our classroom and having it be an expectation that we knew how to use it. And we grown up with the internet, personal cell devices. Those are all elements that make us really digital natives, and it makes utilizing technology such an important tactic in how you relate to Gen Z and how you communicate with them. Another really big quality about being a digital native is that Gen Z spends usually 6+ hours a day looking at a screen, utilizing technology, social media, but it's not just for scrolling on social media. I would say Gen Z today is utilizing it to build community, build connections. It's shopping, finding reviews, finding where we're going to spend our dollars at. And it's all through these digital devices.
Thank you, Megan. So I think to put this in context, we want to talk about why you should care about attracting Gen Z customers. Knowing all this information, why does this matter? Why should you put resources and time into attracting this group? So something that we think about a lot when we're designing our programs is the buying power and capacity of Gen Z, and they're just getting started. So currently they hold about $360 billion in buying power, and that's only going to continue to grow as more of them become of legal age and have their own income and things like that. I think there's a large majority in this moment, but that's only going to become bigger, especially with AI and technology improving. Like they just released a new iPhone. Like these are the people who are not only buying it, but like teaching us how to use it and taking that where it's going to go next. And something that's important about that is that Gen Z customers are loyal to companies and brands that are transparent about their mission and values and where they're going. And so when you're thinking about building community and utilizing their buying power, being transparent about your sustainability practices and mission and values and what kinds of community you're looking for is going to attract this group as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that Gen Z is like extremely intentional and unique. I think it's probably one of the most individualized generations that we've seen so far. Like there's a huge trend in like individualism and independence. They're all about financial freedom, and a lot of them aren't even really choosing the college route because of that. I know like van life is a huge trend and like digital nomadism and things like that. So they're very like unattached and free-spirited generation. I can attest. I feel like I'm pretty much the same way. But what's important about this is that they see their association with your brand as an extension of their own personal self-expression. So again, if we're thinking about utilizing that buying power, the more transparent you can be and the more vocal you can be about your mission and values and practices and things like that, they're going to be attracted to what you're offering and they're going to stick with you long term. We were looking at some data that said 2 out of 3 Gen Z customers are going to be repeat buyers like throughout their life to a same brand. Like they're not necessarily shopping around for several different products and brands and services. They really want to pick one that's like feels very custom and tailored to them. And then especially, as Megan was saying, being digital natives, they understand the importance of having a presence online and in real life, but especially online, if they associate with what you're offering, they're going to see that as like sending a message to their peers about who they are through what your company represents. So it's just very important to be like specific and intentional with everything you're putting out.
So a big question is, where in the world are Gen Z customers? Where are we? That's the big thing here. A really big thing to note with Gen Z is as the generation continues to get older, as we're not the youngest generation anymore, there is a younger generation before us. There are a lot of us who are on college campuses or living in big cities. Big cities are seeing a really large migration, an increase for Gen Z. Again, that comes from the desire to really build community and find your people. And then the easiest and biggest place to find Gen Z, if they're not in a big city, is on their phones. 75% of us spend our free time online, and 73% follow one or more brands on social media. Again, I can attest to that. I've found many brands that I feel like I myself align with, and those are the ones that I'm going to follow on social. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You can see the new things that are coming out with them, with the brands that you're following. You'll see the new products, new designs first, but you'll also be able to tell if it's a brand that you truly want to align yourself with based on how they're communicating to you. So it's really important to think about that when you're trying to reach this audience online. Another thought with that is that Gen Z is no longer the younger generation that we were talking about. So like Lena had mentioned, we are on college campuses, but then a lot of us have also chosen to go the entrepreneurial route. Some are skipping college and just going straight into their workforce or becoming an entrepreneur themselves. So it's important to think about things like that, where if you are just secluding yourself to a college campus, you are definitely going to be missing out on other levels of Gen Z who might not fit into that specific realm there.
So how do you connect with them now that we've told you where they are? That's the following question. So something that we have really been utilizing this year, especially to reach this Gen Z audience for our clients, is leaning into nostalgia, which I know seems like maybe that's leaning towards the older end, but it's absolutely leaning towards the younger end too. I think just yesterday I was seeing online some Gen Zs that were maybe like, I would say they were like 14, 15, talking about like, oh, I wish I was in high school in 2016, like having nostalgia for something that feels very recent to me, but it seems like the old past to them. So something that we find interesting, right, is like tapping into this desire for emotional connection, whether that's like current or past, creating relatable touch points that acknowledge shared experiences. So talking about like older memes like the one that we referenced for this presentation, talking about different cultural moments. Like I'm on the side of social media where they talk about like old ways of doing makeup and how the way we did our makeup in 2016 is not how it's done now. So creating a community around that kind of thing, and then capitalizing on the resurgence of past trends, like I was just saying, or like old cartoons or old movies or cultural moments like that, like I had mentioned. So we are seeing a huge return on that, and Megan can talk more about that on the next slide.
Yeah, so we actually, like Lena said, we've utilized this idea of nostalgia with some of our clients this past year. And one of the really awesome events that we hosted was for a client who really tapped into the idea of like a 90s throwback to reach Gen Z. So I personally was born in 97, so was at that end of the throwback of this era, but it's really like personal to me as well. Like these are still things that I grew up with, even being on the older end of the spectrum. So we hosted an event called Milwaukee Recess, really tapping into the idea of going back to those elementary school days of being in recess and being able to hit the playground and hang out with your friends during that free time. I think that the nostalgia idea is a really fun idea that introduces play into the way that you can work with your audience and really be playful with them. So whether that's thinking about throwback games or foods or products, nostalgia really screams fun and positivity, and will encourage that laughter and camaraderie. So we utilized this throwback style event where there was a ton of games. We hosted it in Milwaukee at North South Club. So they had shuffleboard and axe throwing already, but we introduced the idea of like Foursquare, and taped some Foursquare down onto the ground to really introduce like, that's what you used to do at recess. Who was going to be king? And then we hosted your most sugary cereal bar that you could ever imagine, where we had people in line waiting to get into this event being like, is there really a cereal bar here, where it had their Trix, their Cocoa Puffs, their Lucky Charms, all those sugary foods that their parents wouldn't let them have when they were growing up. And then the thing that really stuck with me was there were actual easy bake ovens at the event, where like really hone in on what was my favorite Christmas present. I asked for an easy bake oven when I was like 16 because I thought it was the coolest thing, and I was even throwing it back to when I was 5. And it's still something I would be excited to get these days. But it's really playful, and I think that's a really great way to connect with Gen Z on those memories there.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing this play out in so many different ways, right? Like, I think if you look at Olivia Rodrigo, who's like a huge artist among that Gen Z demographic, I mean, the amount of like 90s influence in her music and in like her music videos. I mean, the fact that that's like resonating is a really big deal. One thing that I noticed recently is that Nintendo Switch is now releasing Nintendo 64 games for the Switch, and like making them kind of like, I think they're more like affordable. And so I think there is this desire for like kind of like a lo-fi like throwback experience, which is really interesting how it's playing out in all of these different all these different sectors.
And the wild thing to me is that when someone says the 90s, I'm like, oh, that was just like 5 years ago. But the thing of it is, it's more than 20 years ago at this point. Though for a lot of us, we remember it like it was yesterday. So it's really fun to play with that idea and tap into it.
So this is why we're really harping on being authentic and authenticity, and some data to just kind of drive the point home. 60% of Gen Z customers are happy to associate publicly with brands they like. So that's what I was saying, like, especially online, they've grown up with influencers and like influencer culture. So it's not that every Gen Z wants to be an influencer, but they understand what it means to like share a product or share a brand online or share a post from a brand about like certain missions and values and practices and things like that. So the more authentic you can be, the more authentic they are going to return that loyalty to you. And 65% like rewards programs and are willing to invest over time. So again, like I was saying, 2 out of 3 are going to repeatedly buy from the same brand and associate with them. And they really value you investing in them long term the way that they are investing in you. They like when things are tailored to them. They like having special access to gated content, and they like kind of getting those little, it's, I would call it like a carrot, you know, like they like those little crumbs to like keep coming back to you and keep building this relationship with you long term. And then, like I had said before, they see their association with your brand as like an extension of their personal self. So it's no longer just like I'm a fan of this item, but like I fully live and breathe like this entire company. Like it really is that deep for a lot of this generation.
I mean, I can attest to that too. Growing up throughout when I was in college, they always used to talk about, I was in the journalism side of things and PR, and we would have interviews about who would your dream client be? And that was always a really fun question for me. And I always thought about, it's an American Eagle brand named Aerie. They do more like loungewear, and their big thing is inclusivity and size and not retouching images. And that was something that always stuck with me. And from now on, I'm 27 now, and Aerie was a brand that was introduced to me back when I was like 15 or 16, but it's still the brand that I follow and utilize, because their messaging has stayed consistent. So I think that that's something that they've been true to who they are as a brand, and they've been authentic. And that's something that has resonated with that generation, like myself. And I've continued to stick with it. So they have continued to get my dollars from it.
I think there's also like an example of like a brand that has changed with the times versus maybe starting off that way, like Aerie. Like I think of Target, and like every time I go into Target, I live right across the street from one, so I'm gonna be vulnerable and say I'm there pretty much every single day because I need something from Target. But I am, like I said, I'm always in the makeup section, and over the past like 2 years, I've seen, you know, more and more of the display ads in the store. Like you said, Megan, like there's no retouching. A lot of them have tattoos and piercings, which is something I've never seen. They have dyed hair. There's models who are in wheelchairs or have mobility aids. Like I think that brands who learn this now early on are capturing this generation when they're in that pivotal stage and in their youth. And then, like you said, they're carrying with them throughout their life. Like we are definitely noticing it when brands do that. This is another example from a client that we have. So this photo is from MATC's Gap Year program, which is something that we do for students who want to take a break in between high school and college. And we set up a 12-week program for them where each week they explore a different career sector in Milwaukee. So we have like culinary, healthcare, sports, medicine, technology, things like that. And we get this group of Gen Z students who come in maybe not really having a direction or knowing what they could be good at or what they want to pursue. And we give them these one-on-one experiences, but at the same time, we facilitate connection amongst them as a group. So then they have this cohort that they are then like growing with. And at the end, they can be rewarded with some paid time to attend school, which is really exciting. And something about just being on the pulse of what this younger generation wants, and like again with like the freedom and individuality, we present this program to them, but they take it into their own hands and they really make it what they want it to be. And that's just something again that we've seen a huge return on, is giving them that freedom.
And then obviously for Gen Z customers, I think reaching them, you have to be thinking about how you pick the right channels, right? Gen Z expects and is influenced by extremely tailored content. So thinking about geo-targeted ads, marketing that touches on shared values and facilitating community building. Video is king. So when you're thinking about where to kind of place your advertising dollars, there's Instagram Reels, so shooting video in 9:16, so that vertical format. Looking at TikTok, which I think has not yet reached like a mass adoption by brands, and so that's a really big opportunity for those who are getting into TikTok right now, and using things like sponsored hashtags or custom filters, things like that nature. And then Snapchat, YouTube, among others. And I'll just jump in. This is one of our clients, but really focusing on sharing, faces, beautiful imagery, colorful, focusing on that 9:16 format, going to the platforms that people are on is really key.
Another really big thing to keep in mind when you're trying to communicate with Gen Z here is really talking about issues that matter on your brands. So why do that? I know it's a dicey subject for a lot of brands of feeling like, oh, do I have to pick a side in things? Like, that's not what I want to do. I want to be that third party that stands away from it. But it's really also critical to remember that 70% of us Zoomers or Gen Z are really involved in social or political causes. So if you're not being a part of the conversation, we're going to notice. We're going to see that they're trying to stay out of it and they're not making choosing a side in that matter. So just be aware of that is something that is in the back of our head, and that 50% of Gen Z customers will willingly boycott brands that they consider like corrupt or things of that nature due to a political, social, or environmental stance. So it's not saying that you have to be one way or another, but it's just something to have in the back of your mind when you're thinking about Gen Z, because they are a very politically and socially active generation who really cares about this. It's a really informed generation, going back to the fact that we are digital natives and that we've grown up with all of this technology. So we're able to get information. A lot of us do research ourselves and figure out the root of a lot of different causes. So it's important to keep this about why you're picking a side or if you're staying out of it, because it is something that they will notice.
And I'll just say too, no matter what stance you're taking, just be transparent about it and just own it. I think that Gen Z, they're not all, I think the generation as a whole leads very progressive and free-spirited, like I was saying, but they're not all that way. And if your brand is what it is, that's totally fine. But I would say just be transparent about it and you will still build a huge community. That is truly what matters, because for as many people who will like promote a product without doing research, there's like equally as many Gen Zs who are going to like be right there to like spit out the facts. So as long as you are like being authentic and not necessarily trying to hide anything that your brand is doing, a Gen Z will be like very open and receptive to that across any spectrum, truly.
I think something else that is really important to remember, and Wyatt, if you want to click to the next slide here, this doesn't mean that you have to straight up say like, we stand with so-and-so, or we agree with this that's going on in the social political climate at the moment. There's really subtle ways to do this and to let Gen Z know that it's something that you're passionate about. Going back to my example with like Aerie, letting them know that these images aren't retouched. Okay, that lets me know that you're about transparency and that you want us to see what it actually is. Another program that we've worked on in the past was a program called The Shift, which was a female-focused speaker series that really focused on gender equality in the workplace. That just lets me know that you're prioritizing women and that that's something that you care about and that I'm going to have a safe space at your company. So showing different ways of doing that, that's not the company saying, hey, we want this amount of women in leadership roles and we think that XYZ. It's just showing that I'm being prioritized at your company. So again, there's subtle ways to do this rather than just saying, this is why. So I think that's something to be aware of. And there was a comment in here about where Gen Z is researching or looking for jobs. And I saw Lena just made a post here too about it. But I think both influencers, but then also connections is still a big thing as well. You hear about feedback from your friends or family who have worked somewhere else. And it's really sometimes about who you know and wanting to get a good idea of why. So it comes back to a lot of those classic ways as well for searching for jobs, which also leads to authenticity here.
Yeah, I think Gen Z definitely is looking for a lot of social proof when it comes to when they're looking for jobs. So, they might use some search tools like LinkedIn, or I know Glassdoor, because they can see employee reviews. But then I think they really want and appreciate like a first-hand account. And so I think, looking at where your brand is showing up in the community, what you can do to bring your brand to Gen Z candidates is a really big thing. I also think, don't overlook like custom or like niche job boards, because I know that's also a thing. I think when we look at like the individualization, I think a lot of Gen Z are looking at job boards that are maybe more tailored to things like jobs for remote work or jobs in a specific industry. So I think it's good to look there as well. Awesome. We have a few minutes if anyone else has questions in the chat. Feel free to add them now. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us. We have the email on the slide here, or of course, feel free to add myself or Megan or Lena on LinkedIn if you want to keep the conversation going.
Especially if you would I was just going to say Wyatt, especially if you'd like a firsthand Gen Z account, you can always reach out to Lena or myself. We'd always be happy to chat up about our generation, even though we are on that older end of it.
Megan and I want to do a Gen Z audit for a client so badly. So if you are interested in that, please come talk with us. We want to figure it out for you. We love doing this.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone had a great time this morning. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you more in the future. Thanks, everyone.